Today is the third video in my new series for 2024 called Give a Gift series. So this will be the third gift that you can make. So first, let's review what was made in January and February. The first gift were these super cute pin cushions made out of selvages. Now these were a lot of fun to do. If you're interested, you can check out the video. I'll put a link for the video in the description below. But this was the gift that I showed how to make in January. In the second video, I took a bunch of leftover orphan blocks and I made these super cute pot holders. And I showed how to make these. Those all turned out to be really cute pot holders. So those were for January and February. And in March, I made this super cute table topper. You could use it for a wall hanging, a table topper, a placemat, whatever you wanted to use it for. I think I'm going to use it for a table topper, but it turned out super cute, and I used some more leftover orphan blocks and some scraps that I had left. But these two pumpkins and these two pinwheels were orphan blocks that I had left. Today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this table topper. So let's get started. The first thing I want to show you is how to make this little pumpkin block. Now this is a 5.5 inch block. I've made this block before and I'm going to be showing you footage from a previous video. Now on the clip from the previous video you will see a white border around here, but don't worry about that. You won't be using that. You'll just be using this block right here. So I want to show you the cuts of fabric you're going to need. You're going to need 2 1-inch squares. You are going to need 5 1.5-inch squares, and this is all from your background fabric, and you're going to need 1 1.5 by 2.5 inch strip. You're going to need 1 green 1.5 by 1.5 inch square, as well as 1 brown 1.5 by 1.5 inch square. You're going to need an assorted number of strips that are 1.5 inches, and that is going to be for the block portion of the pumpkin. All the oranges are going to be used to make this. Now if you didn't want to do a pieced one, you could do a solid pumpkin if you'd like and just quarter those if you didn't want to do all the pieces, but I wanted to change it up a little bit and do something a little bit different. First thing we're going to do is we're just going to sew some strip sets together. Now I'm going to sew mine together in strip sets of 2 and 3. And the reason I want to do just a mix-up is so that when I line up my strip sets, you're going to need 4 strip sets of 5. But we want to be sure that there's a mix-up of them so we don't have 2 right next to each other. So I'm just going to start sewing these together. I'm going to sew one group together in 3 and the other groups together in 4s. I mean 1 in 3s and 1 in 2s, and then I'll be able to mix and match them nicely. Okay, now that I have some of my strips cut, I am going to cut these 2 inches wide. Now I'm going to end up trimming them down to 1.5 inches, but I'm going to oversize them so that I can trim them down into nice, perfectly sized strip sets. So I'm just going to cut these up. Alright, now that I have my strip sets cut approximately, then I can start laying them out to see how they're gonna go together. And the only thing I'm really looking for is I don't want 2 of the same fabrics right beside each other. They can be diagonally, I'm not concerned with that, but I don't want them to be right next to each other. Okay, so that was quick to lay out. Now I'm just going to sew each row together, and then I'm going to trim each row down to 1.5 inches. Okay, so I have the strip set sewn together, and now I'm just going to trim them down to 1.5 inches. So you can see now why I oversized those. I just like them all to just look perfect. Well, not perfect. So you can see now how that's going to look. And I just need 4 of these, so I'm going to go ahead and trim these. The next thing we're going to do is snowball each of these corners to make the pumpkin. So we're going to snowball these corners right here just to make the pumpkin. And the way we do that, we're just going to draw a line from corner to corner. I will pin those on there. You do have to be careful with some of these background fabrics. You want to be sure you're drawing on the wrong side. Alright, now I'm just going to pin those down and sew right across the line. Okay, so I'm going to remove these pins, and I'm just going to take my ruler and I'm going to trim off these corners. Okay, I'm just going to take these to the iron and I'm just going to press those back, and then that is the base of our pumpkin. That's the base right here of our pumpkin. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, we're going to make this little piece right across the top. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to take our 2 1-inch squares, and on the back side we're going to mark right across there. And we are going to snowball 2 corners, these 2 corners. And then we're going to trim them off and press them back just like we did for the pumpkin. Okay, so I'm just going to trim those off. And press those back. And that becomes the leaf right here. That becomes the leaf right there. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the brown square, or whichever one you chose for the stem, and I'm just going to sew those together and press them open. Okay, so there is the stem and the leaf, and now we just need to sew these other 2 pieces on. Now on the stem side you sew another 1.5 inch square, and then on the other side you take your other piece and sew that on, and then we'll be trimming that off. So those are ready to sew on, and as you can see there, I need to trim that off 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to sew that on, and then I'm going to trim off that little bit there on the end. So it's going to look just like that, and it's going to end up looking just like this. not sure why I left that on there. I usually trim those right off. Okay. The next thing I'm going to show you how to make is this little pinwheel block. I've shown you how to make half square triangles before, but I'm going to show you quickly again. So you're going to need 2 white squares that are 3 3/4, and you're going to need 2 green squares that are 3 3/4, and we'll be trimming them down to 3-inch half square triangles. The first thing you're going to do is just take a ruler and just mark from point to point. Now this is your guide, and you're just going to sew 1/4 of an inch on either side of that line. The line will be the line you cut on. And again, be sure you have the wrong side of the fabric facing up. You want to be sure to mark on the wrong side of the fabric. Then I'm just going to put right sides together. I'm going to put a couple of pins in there, and I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch on either side of that line. Okay, as you can see, I've sewn a little seam on either side of that line, and I'm just going to cut these apart for my half square triangles. And I will be pressing these to the green side. I've pressed those open, and I'm just going to trim these down to 3 inches. Once I have all 4 of the half square triangles made, then I will just arrange them in a pinwheel, and I will sew them together and press them to look just like this block. That's how you will make the pinwheel block of this project. The next block I'm going to show you is the larger pumpkin block. Now, I had a previous video that I showed how to make these, but I've changed it up a little bit, so I'm going to show you how to make this block. Let's take a look at the fabric requirements you're going to need. Now, you're going to need a foundation piece that is 8.5 or 9 inches square. You are going to need a variety of 2-inch strips of orange for the body of the pumpkin. You can choose another color if you'd like. You're going to need 1 2-inch green square and 1 2-inch brown square. This is for the stem, and this is for the leaf. The green is for the leaf, and the brown is for the pumpkin stem. You're going to need 2 1-inch squares to snowball the corners of the leaf. You're going to need 5 2-inch squares, and that will be used to snowball the corners of the pumpkin as well as for this piece right here. So those are 2-inch, 5, that's 5 2-inch background squares. And then this piece here is going to be 2 by 3.5 inches. We're going to start by laying our first strip down. And I am just going to put a little bit of fabric glue right along that strip. Nothing very heavy. I'm just going to take that and I'm just going to lay it right over there. Now I use the fabric glue just to hold it in place while I sew these other strips on. Then you're going to find your next piece, and you're just going to sew from here down to here, and you're going to sew 1/4 of an inch. And then you'll press that back, and you're going to do the same with a piece over here. You're just going to sew that on and then press it back. Now you can see how that looks. I sewed those on and pressed it back. And I'm just going to continue doing that with my other fabric pieces. I'll just lay them on there, press them back until the whole piece is full. Alright, I've covered the whole thing and I've pressed all of the strips back. And now I'm just going to trim this down to 8 inches. Now there is the base for the pumpkin. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a line on the back of each of these 1-inch squares. Be sure you're marking on the wrong side from point to point, and we're going to mark the same on the 2-inch squares, background squares that we're going to use to snowball the corners of the base of the pumpkin. Oops. Now that those are marked, we'll just pin those on each corner. And then we're just going to sew right there on the outside edge of that line. And we're going to do that on all 4 corners. For the base of the pumpkin, we're going to take the 2-inch square for the stem and we're going to pin these little squares on there. And we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to sew just 1 thread width below that line. All these are sewn, and I'm just going to remove the pins. I'm just going to remove the pins and I'm going to trim these down. I'm going to do the same with this little stem. Alright, now I'm going to take this to the iron and I'm going to press all these back. Alright, so those are done and those are ready to go. I'm going to set those aside and show you how to do this top portion. We're going to have our stem, our leaf, our 2-inch square, 1/2 by 3.5 inch piece, and I'm just going to sew those together to make this strip right here. Okay, and then this piece will just go right on top of that, and when I sew it together it will look just like this one. I have this fantastic green fabric. I had just a tiny bit of it. I just have a little bit left. But I'm going to put, I changed this is the layup I'm going to use. I auditioned several different layouts, and this is the layout I'm going to use. This piece was cut 3.5 by 5.5. This was cut 4.5 by 5.5. I'll sew these together and then sew it to this. I'll sew these 3 together and then I'll sew that to this. Okay, and then there's that, and I'm just going to sew these 2 together, and the top will be done. Now here's the finished piece. It turned out really nice. That's the finished top. And I am going to do a little stay stitch around the edge. I always like to do that, especially since these edges right here are on the bias. And then this will be ready to put together and quilt and bind. Now I'm not sure if I'm going to add a little white border around it. I don't think I'm going to, but I may change my mind. Now that I have the project completed, I did go ahead and I added the little white border around it. I thought it kind of needed that instead of putting the binding right up against this other green. I wanted to create a little bit of space there, but I really think this turned out great. I'm going to try to do a close-up here so you can see how it's quilted, but I did just use a meandering stitch, and I used of course my stitch regulator on my Bernina, and I just did this free motion. So I hope you can see how that is machine quilted there. I don't know if you can see it a little bit better on the back. Kind of all blends right in. Now this turned out to be a great project. This would be a super cute project to make in advance to give somebody for fall decor. It's bright, it's cheery. I love the way it turned out. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And until next time, have fun quilting.